All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much again for joining us for our second edition, actually, of our podcast, our 2021 Juvenile Justice Podcast. Today, I'm honored and privileged to have Tom Johnson here, who's graciously accepted my invitation to come on the podcast and just share some things that are going on in juvenile justice up in Oregon. So, not too far from California, but not too close either. How are you today, Tom?
I'm doing well, sir. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. And so on my last video, people said, "Hey, you did a great job, Ricky, but you didn't tell us anything about, what you do in your organization." So Southern California Anger Management, www.socalangermanagement.com. We provide anger management for juveniles and adults. We also provide parenting classes for a lot of our young people who, need that extra push, because sometimes kids don't know how to be parents simply because they did not have parents themselves, or their parents weren't in a household. So that's what we do. We try to help these kids out and give them all the help that they can get that they have not received at home, because many of them need it. So that's enough about me. But today we have Tom Johnson. Tom, please just tell us about yourself, your background and your experience, and how you got into juvenile justice.
Certainly. First of all, probably the most important thing to point out is that I retired in June of last year.
Okay.
And I had 40 years total working in different areas of Oregon's juvenile justice system. I began as a line staff at a detention center here in Salem, Oregon. I'm speaking to you from Salem, Oregon today.
Okay.
And from there, I was hired as a probation officer in a nearby county. And then for some strange reason, about 7 years later, I decided to go into management and supervisory roles. And that led to working as an administrator at the county level. And considering some of our topic matter, I wanted to make this distinction today. I worked at the county level as administrator and PO for the first, would be a total of 20 years of my career. The last 20 years of my career, I worked for the Oregon Youth Authority. I made the step from county government to state government. And I worked in a variety of roles, primarily as chief deputy over parole and probation. And then I moved to the McLaren Youth Correctional Facility, where I was a program director. And I did that because I just got a better chance to work with youth, and that was something I really missed once I made that step. So been retired for a while now. I've been following the circumstances in California to a certain extent, and adapting to retirement with 2 grandchildren and 4 boys.
Well, see, that's the thing, talking about those grandkids. I learned, from having kids myself, and my sisters and I have kids, that my parents treat our kids much differently than they treated us. My kids get away with murder, figuratively. And, my parents laugh, "Oh, but, I get to spoil them. I get to send them back home to you." I'm like, what happened between parenting and grandparenting that you just let these kids just do anything? But I love it. I love the relationship that my parents have with my kids. But I do see a difference in the way they treated us and the way, they treat them. So
there's no way I can deny that. And all I can say is I got tired parenting.
Right.
And the grandkids, it is a different role, but I absolutely love it. I'm sure everybody does.
Absolutely. So tell me about your experience going from a line staff. And so for folks out there who don't know what line staff are those who work directly with the minors in the system. They are the bread and butter of a juvenile detention facility. They're there. They have the best relationship with the kids. They see them when they come in. They're there with some of their toughest moments in life. But tell me about the experience from going from a line staff into administration, and did the mindset change? I mean, I'm sure it had to change somewhat, but how were you able to still keep that, understanding of what the line staff were going through from an administrative position?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I regretted that decision for a couple of years throughout my career, and it's primarily what led me back to working at a facility. I stayed as an administrator, of course, but the line staff themselves, and I will say this on behalf of all line staff that I have met and and line staff that are out there right now, they have the most crucial and the most important role in juvenile justice, period, hands down. And I firmly believe that they really need the one thing that a line staff often needs is more training and more experience and good mentoring and that's what actually brought me into supervisory and then administration, is because of the fact that when I became a supervisor, there was no handbook because that was a long time ago. There was no handbook that was there to read or to pick up and say, oh, here's what I do. So basically what I did is the same thing that any person would do who's working in this field, is I treated my staff the way that I would want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and granted, it took a while. The one thing that I learned is that just like as a probation parole officer, you can't necessarily hide or conceal who you really are, and especially with youth that you're working with, because they have a survival skill. And this is my opinion. They have a survival skill that they can basically read people, especially adults, especially people in authority.
Oh yeah.
Within the span of the first 3 to 5 minutes that they come into contact with you, and they'll know more about you than you would ever be comfortable with.
Oh, yeah, and, you're right. I mean, I've had experiences where kids come in and say, "Oh, Hodges, they go by last name. Hodges, you must be going through something. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your walk. You're not as happy as you usually are today. Everything okay? What's going on? Or, hey man, you're putting on weight. Or, hey man, you getting in shape, huh? You've been doing push-ups at home. I mean, they pay attention. They know, and they know who cares about them, and they know who doesn't.
That is absolutely true.
Line staff survival in a facility, because if they know you don't care about them, if you're just there for the check, they're like, okay, well, we're going to make you earn this money. But if you care about them, there are certain things that you can say to them in a certain manner that they will receive it from you. Whereas someone that they don't care for, or that they realize that does not care for them, they won't receive it from them. And I have a completely different experience by saying the same exact thing.
And that's right there. I couldn't have said it better myself. That is line staff policy number 1.
Yes,
right
sir.
There.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when we think about, we saw how you went from line staff to administrative soup or in administration. What types of minors are being, put into custody in Oregon? So I know you've done your research in California, so we'll transition to California after this question. But what types of minors are being, placed into custody, and what types of offenses? And when you look at California, what path would you say California is headed down? And, what's your opinion on the things that are happening here in California?
Well, coincidentally, back in the 1980s and 90s, because I'm that old, Oregon tried a similar move. It was more or less a project. It was more or less a test case in regards to how that would work out. And we wouldn't have the time today to go into it, but there are a lot of reasons why it didn't work. And primarily it was an issue of territory, and then it was an issue of funding. Right. And so when I read what California is proposing right now, I'm sure that I'm not saying anything that people haven't already thought of. So in essence, those are the things that I would see coming ahead. I mean, funding revolves it all now.
So give me an example of a couple of things that California is proposing right now, and juxtapose it to Oregon and what was attempted, and what your opinion is based upon your experience, because you have the credentials, you have the experience, to give an opinion on this, and as to what you foresee, the ultimate outcome being in California if they continue down this path.
Wow, that's an important question. I think that the first thing that I will say is that the county government and the state government is going to have to be on the same page. Now, I've already read that county government is not crazy about the idea. They're fearful they will be, quote, holding the bag. And to some extent, that was the experience in Oregon too. But since that time that was initiated, and Oregon Youth Authority itself didn't even come into existence until the mid 1990s, after we had a complete reform of our juvenile code. And prior to that, they were the, pardon the phrase, redheaded stepchild of Department of Human Services. So they were already at the end of the rung. They became their own agency, and they immediately sought out how it is that they could have better partnering with families. So that took time, but everything revolved around money. That's the issue first. The second issue is that the state is proposing that counties take over some very, very important and delicate services for these youth, primarily incarceration. Yes. And I read one particular statement in one of the news articles that said that the state of California is concerned that as things get handed over to county courts, they may have, are there 52 counties in California? Is that what I read?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 52. So 52 types of justice that will occur from county to county. Now, generally and overall, that's always the case anyway. You're going to have culture, you're going to have statistics, demographics, and the leaders of a county, the county commissioners and the juvenile court judge will basically set that tone. Right. And so to me, if I were on the outside looking in, which I guess I am, I would say that the counties absolutely need to be in lockstep with the state. In other words, I don't see this, and I don't think it's being proposed this way, that this is just an automatic handoff in a couple of years, that the state and county governments are going to have to figure out how to make this work, because of the fact that somebody, I'm assuming, and primarily your number one customer, who is the taxpayer, is going to ask, is this working?
Right.
Is juvenile crime going down? Am I safer? Am I not safer? Those are all things that are going to have to come into play as a conversation. And as a county administrator here in Oregon, 2 different counties that I worked in prior to coming to Oregon Youth Authority, that was constant. And not to mention the fact that there has to be a continuum of services from the point of intake all the way through to the point of parole. Now, hoping obviously that very few youth will make that full journey. But the fact is that the county has to be prepared to address those youth at all levels.
Absolutely. I mean, you said a mouthful. I would say you have those 52 counties, but they're not all made equally. So one county may not be capable of even, housing that high level minor. And we use the word minor loosely, but in California, you're talking, in DJJ, they call it the Department of Juvenile Justice, used to be California Youth Authority. You have kids all the way up to 25 years old. And so now you're going to take 25-year-olds and place them in a juvenile institution with staff that are trained to handle up to 18-year-olds. So now you're going to mix kids that you have already in a juvenile setting that you previously had with the 25-year-olds who are extremely sophisticated. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And as I said, you have certain counties that just simply are not capable of housing these minors or these detainees, and it's going to be a mess. And I don't think that it's been well thought through. I think COVID has been, COVID is horrible, and we've seen a lot of loss of life, unfortunately. But COVID has been used, to get a lot of things done that really haven't been thought through, and has been pushed through in the name of COVID. Say, hey, we want to get these kids out, but are the streets safer? You hit on that. Are they? The reality is, no, they're not, because statistics can be put out and padded any way that anyone wants them to be put out. Because yes, maybe arrest rates are down. Well, arrest rates are down because they're saying that we're not going to prosecute on certain crimes. So yeah, we won't include that in the arrest numbers. But the streets are, at least here in California, in particular in the communities where they say that they want to help the most, I mean, they're being hurt the worst. because
Yeah.
crime is being committed. You're allowing folks to come out who really haven't been rehabilitated, who still need treatment on the inside, who didn't get the proper treatment on the inside, like you said, because it makes no sense to lock them up and not give them the treatment and the services that they need on the inside. So that's just my opinion on that. I don't want to go deep into it, but there has to be that treatment on the inside. That is essential.
And based upon the model that's being proposed, there has to be a continuum of treatment that accompanies that case plan, as we refer to it here in Oregon, that case plan that accompanies that youth into the facility or the residential program, and then follows them out of that facility in a very dynamic way. And so that way, everybody's on the same page in regards to what this youth is actually going to need. Now, the thing that struck me while you were talking is that one of the ways that we hear best, in my opinion, about how the system is working when it comes down to determination of arrests is from your local police agencies.
Right.
My experience had been on a couple of occasions is that we dealt with jurisdictions who were doing juvenile arrests and what we refer to as juvenile referrals and sending them in, and then they stopped because once they saw or got wind of or someone told them that the juvenile justice system is not going to take steps to hold this person accountable and ultimately provide them treatment, they stopped sending in reports.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's almost, you hate to say sit on your hands, but essentially that's somewhat what's happening. Then you have all the other dynamics of, I have friends that are police officers, and unfortunately they say, hey, look, I just don't want to be on the news. I don't want to be on the news.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose my job. I don't want any issues for going out and doing the job of attempting to protect the community. And so there's so many different, dynamics and factors that people are facing, and it's unfortunate. And the difference from county to county, and in LA, the counties are right next door. The county where I live, I mean, it's a completely different justice system as opposed to, the county, where I work. And so you just don't know from place to place, but there has to be, some consistency across the board, in particular, as we release these hardened, criminals back into the community and they're supervised within, the counties. I mean, the big question is, are the communities safer? And that's a question that I guess is in the eye of the beholder. And so it's something that we really need to consider as we continue to release folks back into the community here in California.
One of the things that Oregon Youth Authority has done to address that issue is to go into, and we started this many years ago, we started doing what is referred to as predictive analytics, which is fancy word for saying collect data and then follow it. And so that's the step that we have, and I continue to say we inclusively as if I'm a part of that. I'm not a part of the organization. I got to remind everybody of that. So it's a hard habit to break after 20 years. But the OIA moved into that direction and started distinguishing who the youth are that are most in need of treatment based upon those analytics. And we're talking about risk factors and need factors and strength factors and those kind of things that go into responsible case planning. And I don't know that we're there yet, but we're in a much better place to be able to define, going back to one of your original questions, who that youth is that's coming in to the state's custody.
Right.
And at the county level, there is a lot being done by county governments to try to keep those youth in the county because there's incentive to do so. The cost of holding a youth in a correctional facility is humongous. It's the last time I checked the number, I was in the last couple of years of my career, I was afraid to hear the number unless I had to, but it was well over $300 a day.
Right. Oh yeah. So tell me successful programs that you all ran there for the youth that they were able. Maybe it was here in California. There was a fire program that a lot of the minors were able to go into, and they were treated with respect, just as if they were firefighters. They went through hard training. I used to go out and hike with those guys. We're hiking 7-8 miles up. Luckily for me, I didn't have to have all the equipment on, but it was still hard. I mean, you got guys. The kids got the chainsaws. They're going out And for me, one of the best days was when we actually got to go out on a fire. I mean, we were just sitting at the park having lunch, and then the radio went off, and it was an actual fire to see the kids get dressed. And the way it goes is the first team that's dressed and the first team that's on site is the first team that gets to go into the fire. And so there was another a state prison team that was nearby, but our kids got there first. They got to go down that canyon, put the fire out, and the pride that they had on their faces and the joy and the congratulations that they received from the actual firefighters who treated them as if they were colleagues was amazing. Yeah. But due to budget cuts, due to everything else, we don't need the program. We get rid of the program. And so the same kids that, were doing well, now all of a sudden you see them trickling back through the doors again. So any programs that you guys ran out there, why don't you share that with us?
Sure, of course. There are many, and we're on that same page with you. The first thing that I'll always say in regards to discussing programs is that there are so many variables that come into play regarding the kind of programming that a youth needs. And obviously the big buzzword nowadays is brain development and level of maturity. And those things are going to be extremely important in regards to where you put that youth. Now, we have also a fire training program at one of our camps here in Oregon. It's in Eastern Oregon. And had I been smart 20 years ago, I would have convinced my family to move over there and gotten a job at that facility, because I would love to go out and do that kind of stuff with the guys. And unfortunately, yet with that kind of a program, which now is bringing youth into full-time employment once they leave custody,
right.
We don't yet have girls in that yet, and we really need to be focusing on how it is that we can improve their situation as well. We have a significant female population that is now growing. But you asked about treatment. And there are a variety of levels of treatment that involve family engagement at the facility level. And that is obviously the key to where we see the success. The more we can have a family involved, and the more that we can do an adequate transition out of treatment for that youth back into the community, the better off that we're going to be. And the data says that the shorter the stay, the better. But at the same time, very much like what you talked about earlier, we got to be sure that these folks are ready to leave. If it's a money issue that is coming into play regarding how it is that we manage our population, we're going to have problems.
Right.
But to be specific, we have an overarching mentality doctrine, I would call it, in Oregon Youth Authority called Positive Human Development, which is very similar to Positive Youth Development. And it's a method in which we have trained all of our staff in the how-tos of relating to youth. Wow. Now, what we have, but again, let's just be very clear that we're far from the panacea here. And there's a lot more work to be done, because the manner in which we went about it was, just my opinion, hurried, not well thought out, and the staff were not they themselves were not necessarily involved in the rolling out of the program. And so the idea is very simple. And when I began as a probation parole officer myself, what we have written down as the doctrine of positive human development was exactly what we did in our job, unstated, unspoken, and unwritten, 30 years ago. And that is, you treat the youth with respect. You are not a jailer. You are not, let me reframe that. You're not a jailer first.
Right.
You are a human being. You are also an authority, but at the same time, you're an advocate.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to put all those things on the table at the same time as you're dealing with the youth. And it's a fine line to walk. It's very difficult. But frankly, if we don't have our staff who are relating to youth in that manner and are being fair but firm and, most importantly, consistent,
right,
then the treatment that you do is going to be secondary, because those youth won't feel safe.
Oh, yeah.
The youth that do the best in treatment are the youth that feel as if there is some element of safety in where they live. Right. And, we just, in California, a significant gang issue. In Oregon, we have a significant gang issue. And that's an area where, at least as I left, the agency is working really, really hard to improve the programming that is being done for the gang members, because I would guess, I don't have the data in front of me to back it up, but I would guess that of the recidivists that we have, they are in that demographic is very, very high.
Well, it comes down to a fear thing, to be quite honest, because we talked about, family and fear. Honestly, many of our kids come back because, hey, I don't have family. Hey, this is what is better than me having my own bed. One kid told me, said, this is the first time I've ever had my own bed in my whole life. It's like, I'm 16, and this is the first time I've ever had my own bed. I can come in here, have people watching me 24/7. I get to eat 3 meals a day. I get to go to the doctor. I get all these things. And so, unfortunately, for a lot of these kids, like, going to jail is, it's better than being at home. And, it's a sad state of affairs when that is the case for any child, that, hey, going to jail is better than home, but it's a sad reality. And then the fear portion is, hey, these streets are tough. I'm homeless. I don't have anywhere to stay. I don't have to do anything. The big homies are going to try to make me do X, Y, Z. So, hey, let me go inside. At least I may have some of my friends here from the same gang, so now I really have a little protection, but ultimately I have the staff that are there to protect me, that look out for me, that not going to I may get into a fight, but I know somebody's going to come break it up. It's not like being in the work alley by myself. I got a good 15 seconds, and then someone's coming over, stop fighting to break that up. And so that's what I see when I see a lot of these kids. And then the heartbreaking part is, as you said, I've seen kids that essentially, I call them that I help raise them. Came in at 14, 15, 16, 17, keep coming in and out. And then you get the call, hey, so-and-so got killed when he went outside. Hey, so-and-so was, went out and committed a drive-by shooting, and now he's, being held as an adult on a murder charge. It takes a toll on you when you put in a lot of time and effort with these kids. And if you care about the kids, I mean, it has to. And that's been one of the things that I had to separate and say, hey, you know what? I can't get so consumed, because I can get consumed, because you can say, oh, this is a sad story. Oh, it's tough. It's rough. And you can get consumed as a professional, but there has to be that fine line between professionalism and personal, and to say, hey, I'm here to do my job to the best of my ability when I'm here, and I'm going to give you all the resources that we can give you, but it's going to be up to you to receive it.
That's very well put. And I think it's one of the curses as well as the blessings of what we refer to as social service. Right. That you're bound to get overly attached to certain youth, and then you are bound to have to make choices about where it is you draw the boundaries and the barriers. Because let's be clear, this kind of revolves back to our staff, in that when you do have a tragedy, and I read one of the articles, I think that last year there were 5 deaths in your correctional facilities. I think I read that. In Oregon, we have had suicide deaths, but we have not, as far as I know, we have not had any homicides. We have attempted homicides, but the fact of the matter is that it's simply based upon volume. You're going to have fewer of those depending on the population. However, my point there is that you got to take care of your staff in those situations.
Right.
And that must be a mandatory protocol. Very much like when sorry to say this out loud, when a police officer is involved in a shooting, that police officer, she or he will be then taken off the line for a while for the purposes of investigation. Right. And granted, that's a big problem for the funding of police agencies, because they got to bring somebody in, fill in behind them. But if you want to keep and retain your staff, you're going to have to, as an administration, respond to that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Tom, tell me, what are you doing now in retirement? You have all this knowledge, all this skill set. I mean, you can't just turn it off after 40 years of working in this environment. What are you doing now?
What I'm doing now is I'm still adjusting to retirement. I grew up on a farm in Central Oregon, and I understand the work ethic probably to a fault. And so I'm now adjusting to what it means to be a retired person. And frankly, I was wishing that I was a psychiatrist, because I could open a practice. Right. I'm wondering if other people are going through this, and obviously they are. To answer your question directly, I'm looking for a place where I could plug in and I could assist, whether it's a matter of consultation or it's a matter of being a part-time staff or excuse me, an advisor. And obviously with the COVID, the virus, the pandemic, those options are very, very limited right now.
Right.
I will tell you that I'm enjoying retirement. There are many things about working in a juvenile correctional facility that I don't miss, but what I frankly do miss is the interactions with youth, which, as you know, it keeps you fresh and it
Right.
keeps you educated and it keeps you knowledgeable because you know what the circumstances are in the field in which you're working.
Right. And you're also a teacher as well, a college professor, right?
Yes, it's a community college, so saying professor is a little bit of a stretch. So
Oh,
I'm referred to as an instructor, but the bottom line is that I teach criminal justice classes. I've been teaching at this local community college, Lynn Denton Community College, for 22 years, and they're a great group, and it's a lot of fun to work for them. What I enjoy the most is the students, because you're going to probably have maybe 1/3 of the students that come through these 200 level classes that are going to continue in the field. I will tell you right now, because I've kept track, this sounds like vanity, but I have kept track of some of the staff that have come through the college and then gone on to, I should say students, and then got on to work in the field. And right now I'm at about 10 or 11, I think, that keep in touch with me. And I appreciate that, because I try to teach. Same thing as with being a supervisor. I try to teach in the manner in which I would most enjoy being taught myself and what I would respond to. And primarily it's hands-on stuff. The fact of the matter is that working in this field, you're not going to learn what you need to learn in college. You're going to learn it on the line.
No.
And it's very hard to replicate that in a college classroom. So we do our best.
Yeah, I learned that when I went to the academy. I was like, oh yeah, I'm ready to go. Then I got to my facility the first day and I said, man, this is absolutely nothing like what you said was in that book when we got there. And you're right. Experience is the best teacher in this career line. And so those who are excited about going into it, we want to get into it, I would encourage you to do so. But go in with the mindset of that you have a job to do. And just do that when you're dealing with, even dealing with adults, because the juveniles become the adult inmates, unfortunately, sometimes. Whatever line of corrections you're working in, treat those that are under your care with respect, treat them with kindness, be firm and fair, do your job, and, you'll have minimal problems. But just do the best that you can do. And at the end of the day, go home safe. That's the goal. Go home safe to your family and make sure that your colleagues get home safe. And I think that everyone will be happy. So, Tom, thank you so much. I don't want to prolong and keep any more of your time. I do appreciate it. Folks, you can see Tom's email there. Feel free to send him an email. He has the experience and the expertise for juvenile justice. And I've enjoyed this conversation. And again, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you and share 30 minutes of your time. Please, sir, take care, stay safe. And, tell your wife to stay safe, and we will do this again.
Same to you, sir. Same to you.
Right.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right.